Hi guys, this is Emma the Vlog Lady, and today I'm going to be talking about episodes 1 of 4 of Twin Peaks: The Return. I've taken some time to absorb the episodes after rewatching them, and I've also been listening to a lot of fan theories and thoughts over the past week or so. I think the Twin Peaks fan community is exceptionally intelligent, and they've come up with some ideas that I just never would have. So I'd love to hear all your thoughts and theories in the comments if you wish to share them. And just a warning that this video may contain theories that may potentially turn out to be true, unlikely, but if you don't want to spoil yourself, if you consider that as a spoiler, then turn me off now. Otherwise, come with me and I'm gonna throw out some thoughts that I've had. Now, I have noticed that a lot of fans are converging on the same ideas, so really with this video I wanted to try and think outside the box, pardon the pun, and come up with some theories that are possibly a little bit more far-fetched. The first thing I want to talk about is the box itself. Sorry, that was my dog. And the idea of this figure in the box. Now, a lot of people are commenting that they think that the figure in the box, who is like that alien type figure who killed the two kids, Sam and Tracy, they think that this is the same figure as was in the floating ship behind the door that was trying to get to Cooper, and where the blind woman was warning Cooper. And I think that this is plausible because of the fact that in that place where Cooper was, in that spaceship, if you like, if you want to call it that, the blind woman was alerting Cooper to be quiet. And in the room in the New York apartment, the thing in the box was enraged after Tracy screamed. So it was as if noise was an agitating factor in why that creature was being disturbed and why that creature wanted to attack or hurt anybody. What struck me immediately was the fact that Ronette Pulaski referred to the creature as Mother. My first instinct was to think, why is this creature being referred to as Mother? Is it Ronette Pulaski's mother? No. Is that really Ronette anyway? Or is it just a construct from Cooper's mind? And then I thought, why is this creature referred to as a feminine entity? Is there some relevance in that? And then I thought, well, what does Mother remind me of? And then I thought, Mothership. And it kind of made me think of that sci-fi show, I think it was called Farscape, where they had a ship that was alive. And they had to treat the ship as a living creature, but they were also traveling within it. That thought came to mind. And then the second thought I had was Mother Earth, or like Gaia, I think is the term that some people use for the planet, Mother Earth. Where am I going with this? Okay, why is this creature agitated by movement or by noise? And what I came up with as my far out theory was that Mother Earth is being disturbed by human beings on the planet, and New York and Las Vegas are about as far as we can imagine from the idyllic quietness of Twin Peaks. And all of this kind of goes back to the idea of Ghostwood as well, about the possibility of Ghostwood being built at the location of the lodges. And you know, the very term Ghostwood implies the loss of natural environment, and it seems like a lot of things to do with the natural environment are important for creatures of the Black Lodge. They specifically, I think, use creatures as their hosts, with the exception of a few like Bob. With each generation with more human population on the planet, I think this is being potentially eroded, and their ability to find animal hosts or plant hosts or whatever they use is diminishing. So could Mother be Mother Earth, who is rebelling against the overdevelopment of the planet? That sounds ridiculous, I know. I certainly think that the creature, if they are the same, I certainly think that the creature who killed Tracy and Sam did seem to be affected by Tracy's scream. The first thing we saw of the creature, they banged themselves against the glass wall, and then they smashed through it once Tracy had screamed. And in the room with Cooper, with the blind woman, she was telling him to be quiet like this. The creature was becoming more and more agitated as they could hear Cooper moving inside the room, and they wanted to get to Cooper and possibly hurt him. That whole sequence, by the way, with Cooper and the blind woman, and Cooper in space, if that's where he was, reminded me of that conversation that Laura and Donna had in Fire Walk with Me when Donna said, do you think if you were falling in space that you'd go faster and faster or slow down after a while? And I think Donna had that idea that possibly you would slow down after a while, and that seemed like a more hopeful thought, but then Laura came in with, no, you'd go faster and faster, and then you'd burst into flames and the angels wouldn't help because they've all gone away. And that conversation came to mind when I saw Cooper falling through the stars. When he landed, I was wondering if that blind woman was potentially an angel, and that Laura had been wrong, and that angel was there to help Coop because she sacrificed herself to save Cooper. Anyway, going on from that, and the idea that the noise might have been what was agitating the mother figure. Who else is agitated by noise in the first 4 episodes? And it's Gordon Cole. If you think about his conversation with Albert, he has an extreme reaction when Albert moves his feet on the ground, and he says it's like a knife in his brain. And that term did remind me of the way that Tracy and Sam were killed. Now, I'm suggesting that Gordon Cole is actually the mother figure. No, I'm not. I think that would be completely far-fetched, but at this stage anyway, to suggest that. But I possibly think that Cole may be on a similar wavelength to the mother figure, and that I don't think the mother figure might have been malicious and was rather reactive. Otherwise, it could be a foreshadowing of Gordon being inhabited by this figure. I don't know. I hope all of that made sense. It barely does to me, but going back to the lodges and their location in the woods of Twin Peaks, I have to say that I did have a moment where I was thinking, well, why can't Cooper just come out through the curtain anywhere? Like, why can't he just walk out through the curtain in Las Vegas or whatever? And I have to assume that the main door of the Black Lodge is in Twin Peaks, and that's the only place you can go through the curtain, maybe. Otherwise they have to use electricity in the same way that Philip Jeffries was travelling via electricity when he appeared in the FBI headquarters and in Buenos Aires in The Missing Pieces as well. Talking about Philip Jeffries, how many times has his name been mentioned in these first 4 episodes, and is anybody finding it very suspicious? Now, I don't think that, David Bowie really did film any scenes. It would be incredible if he did, and they were going to spring that upon us as a secret, as a surprise. But I'm wondering actually if Philip Jeffries has a doppelganger, and that's who Coop has been working with all this time, rather than the real Philip Jeffries, who seemed like a reasonable guy, who seemed as if he'd thrown his whole life at investigating these Blue Rose cases. Certainly the voice that Cooper heard on his machine when he was trying to contact Philip Jeffries was nothing like David Bowie's voice. It wasn't southern in accent. The tone and everything was different. I mean, there is a possibility that the role has been recast and that the person is just doing a Philip Jeffries, or why they would completely not try and emulate David Bowie's performance, I don't know. But there is a possibility too that the voice could have been altered in the same way that Evil Coop's voice sounded different when he was talking to Cole and to Albert. But I'm thinking at this stage that there may be a Philip Jeffries doppelganger, and that could explain some of the changes to Philip Jeffries. We hear Albert say that he contacted Philip Jeffries and gave him some information about Coop to help Coop, and then their man in Colombia was killed. Who was the man in Colombia? Is that important? Or was it just a story to emphasize the fact that both Philip and Evil Coop get rid of anything that was a threat to them? The fact that Philip Jeffries, or the person who said he was Philip Jeffries, said he wanted to be with Bob again, made me think that Bob is being suppressed by Evil Coop, and that Evil Coop is actually more powerful than Bob. If this truly is Philip Jeffries, then why would he want to be with Bob again? Has Bob forged a partnership in the past 25 years with someone else? Was Bob originally more powerful than the Evil Coop, and that's when he forged his partnership with whoever this person is that Coop is speaking to, and then Evil Coop managed to overcome Bob? Maybe there was a battle for power inside of that body, inside of that physical body of Doppelganger Coop, and Evil Coop won in the end. In terms of Cooper and his doppelganger and Dougie Jones as well, I think that possibly the little boy, Sonny Jim, is actually part of Cooper himself, and that he was created from maybe something he left in the lodge. Like, we saw him bleeding in the lodge, and we saw his first reaction to the little boy was to clutch at where he was bleeding from when he was in the lodge. I don't know if he was really bleeding in the lodge or whether it was like a dream of his time with Wyndham Earl, but if he was really bleeding in the lodge, then could that blood, could part of Cooper have been taken by Bob and used as part of his plan? I have seen some theories that Wyndham Earl may be involved, and that part of Wyndham may be still part of Evil Coop, like there is a threesome perhaps inside of Evil Coop. And I am finding myself thinking about Wyndham. The first thing I thought when I saw the bonsai tree in the New York apartment was Wyndham Earl. Who else is connected to the bonsai tree, and why would that be placed there if it wasn't a clue? Maybe it's not a clue, maybe it's just a red herring. But the first people we think about when we think about the bonsai tree is Wyndham Earl. We think of Josie, we think of Gordon Cole shouting bonsai. Things to think about, I think, but I can't see Wyndham being part of it because of the fact that Bob was basically very dismissive of Wyndham inside the lodge. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the first scene where we see the Giant and Cooper together. And I know a lot of people have said that this possibly takes place in the future, and I agree with this. I think we're being alerted to the fact that the timeline may not be static by references such as, is it future or is it past? And I think this does take place sometime in the future. I think Cooper's manner in this scene is calm, and he doesn't seem perturbed when the Giant says it is in our house now. Cooper seems more surprised and willing to accept whatever the Giant has told him. And I think this indicates that he is more at peace now. As for what the sound is, it did remind me of the way the record player turned when we saw Leland killing Maddie. And I wondered if perhaps the Giant was saying that Bob had been taken away, or that Bob had been secured, or he was no longer a threat, or that perhaps Leland and Laura were now at peace. One thing that struck me when the Giant said it is in our house now is that I thought maybe he was talking about the White Lodge, and that actually that scene where they were was situated in the White Lodge, and that's why it was greyed out. Perhaps in future episodes we may see this scene again, and the colour may be in it this time. I am thinking that perhaps the colours of that room are perhaps different to the Black Lodge because of it being the White Lodge. I'm not sure about that, but when that scene happened, I did think of The Secret History of Twin Peaks again, and the way that it explains how there seemed to be two races, one being the Giant. And I wondered if the Giants were part of the beings that were responsible for looking after the White Lodge. Some other things I wanted to talk about was the Mount Rushmore reference. It seemed like a comedy moment, I guess, when Gordon Cole said, "There they are, faces of stone," and he showed Albert the picture of the Mount Rushmore because they weren't able to go and see it. I just found out from reading a little bit about Mount Rushmore, because I was searching for clues, that the person who designed Mount Rushmore or created it originally wanted Lewis and Clark to feature on the memorial, and they were told that they couldn't. They had to have the presidents because they wanted to have a wider appeal. Lewis and Clark are obviously mentioned again by Wally Brando, and of course they are significantly referred to in The Secret History of Twin Peaks as being part of the Twin Peaks story and the mythology. I think the book is proving very important in linking a lot of references together, and I think that possibly if you haven't read the book, then it's a good time to do so before we go any further into the series. Also of note in regards to that is that Abraham Lincoln is one of the faces on Mount Rushmore, and I remember that we had in the cast an Abraham Lincoln impersonator. Could we be having some kind of time issue where we see Abe Lincoln? I just don't know. I don't know what these references mean, but I think it's worth exploring the connections. Another thing I thought was worth mentioning was the idea that Dougie's house and Dougie's life seem to be intertwined with the Black Lodge. Everything around him is labelled by the Black Lodge. So we've got, like, was it Lancelot Court, Merlin Market? Obviously the linking with the Glastonbury Grove from the location of the Black Lodge, and the idea of King Arthur, Arthurian legends. I kind of thought in the first series of Twin Peaks, in the first two series of Twin Peaks, that the whole King Arthur thing was just a random link and that it really wouldn't prove to be important ever. But the fact that they've mentioned it again and that these references are so blatant, I think that maybe we are supposed to think more about the King Arthur legend, about Merlin, about Lancelot, is it? I really don't know much about the King Arthur legend, but I know that Merlin was a magician, and that made me think of The Magician Longs to See. Could we be seeing literal representations of figures from the King Arthur legends? Incidentally, and I'm sorry this is so jumbled, but going back to the scene where we see Cooper, Evil Coop, talk to Gordon and Tamara and Albert. That is a strange scene. Albert looks guilty. I think he is guilty because of his part in giving the information to Jeffries. However, I also thought about that scene again once I saw the blue filter being applied after the scene had taken place, and I wondered if there was any possibility that Evil Coop had forced Bob to inhabit Albert, or perhaps Tamara, or perhaps Gordon, in that moment when he met them, because of the fact that he'd already been warned by this person who was claiming to be Jeffries, and this person said, look, you know, I'm going to be with Bob again because you're going back into the lodge. So perhaps Cooper decided that he didn't need Bob anymore. Bob was a liability, and if his kind or somebody else was trying to get him back into the lodge because of his association with Bob, then perhaps if he set Bob free, that might be a factor that stopped this person from coming after him. I hope that makes sense. I just thought that perhaps the blue filter afterwards implied that something terrible had happened, such as Bob inhabiting one of these three agents. Because of Albert's response and the way he put his head down when he was facing Evil Coop and the way Evil Coop stared at him, I did wonder if Albert perhaps has been inhabited by Bob. That's a horrible thought. I did say in another video that I think that Albert may not survive the series. Potentially that is because Miguel Ferrer was ill during the filming and he maybe wanted a smaller role. Is there anything in the Wally Brando speech that is significant, or was that just pure comedy? It was the most hilarious thing I've seen in a long time, and I have watched that scene many times since, I have to admit. But the fact that he mentioned Lewis and Clark I thought was very interesting, and the fact that he said, I've crisscrossed this beautiful land, is that significant? Were the locations that he said significant? It's difficult to know, but another thing I wanted to say was about the box again. When I rewatched the series, I noticed that Sam said that the person who had the job before him saw something and they survived that experience. So whatever was sucked into the box from the lodges, I assume that's where this creature is being sucked from. I have to assume that, especially if it's being linked to this figure that Cooper saw, or that Cooper experienced in that place with the blind woman. Then I think that it is plausible to assume that other things other than evil entities can be sucked into that box, and I'm wondering whether Laura has been sucked into a box, either in New York or elsewhere. I guess if there is one box set up, then there may have been multiple boxes around the world set up. Who knows? But when Laura was sucked up out the lodge like that, I thought that maybe she was being punished and put in a part of the lodge that, you know, was going to torment her or something. There was a comment, I think there was also a comment that Hawk made in the original series about having to face yourself or something like that when you go through the lodges. And I wondered if Laura had failed that test. It's difficult to think about that because we seem to see her at peace at the end of Fire Walk with Me. I am wondering if Laura has been sucked up out of the lodge and sucked up into a box, and that she's out in the world somewhere adjusting this in a similar way to Coop, Good Coop / Dougie. It's a crazy thought because Laura is dead. I think that's all I can talk about today in terms of theories. I know there are a lot of other things that could be interpreted in the first 4 episodes, but I think there are a lot of questions that we just can't possibly know the answers to at this stage. If you have any of your own theories or thoughts, please leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. You can also connect with me on Twitter and Facebook at the same name, The Vlog Lady. I'm just loving how the whole Twin Peaks fan community is coming together and exploring this show, and I'm so glad that it is an intriguing mystery that we can all dive into. So thank you for watching today. I hope this made sense. Please join me if you like Twin Peaks, and I will be reviewing and reacting to each episode until the end of the season. And that's it. Goodbye.